Regardless of the present, we believe you should never stop planning for your future, for your dreams, for your legacy. Your needs may change over time, but planning is a constant. And so are we. The ABA Retirement Funds Program has been helping the legal community save for a safe and secure financial future for almost 60 years. Our innovative fund menu is designed with participants in mind. We provide the highest standard of investment fiduciary protection under ERISA. We offer extensive resources and proactive customer support, no matter what. Built by lawyers, powered by pros. We deliver purposeful innovation that can help you weather any storm, combined with a unique culture that has helped us retain 99% of our clients year after year. We are a different kind of retirement plan.
Mask up for good governance in the time of COVID-19. Good morning. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken us far from the Chicago lakefront in a basement breakout room at the Hyatt and into your kitchens, home offices, dining rooms, and law firms. Just as we have pivoted this annual meeting, so too we need to rethink our governance. What do our meetings look like? How do we create a board culture? How are we inclusive of new members? What issues should we be tackling? I'll give you some practical tips for optimizing the governance experience in this time of uncertainty and unprecedented challenges facing our organizations, the legal profession, and the administration of justice. Don't simply do what you've always done. A number of these actionable items are practical for whether you're meeting in person or whether you are meeting virtually. If necessary, look at your bylaws. Amend the language in your bylaws. Notice what referenda requirements are. If necessary, you may have to check with your state authorities about what's useful during the pandemic. As Grandma would say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Action item 1, scheduling. Remember, there is nothing sacrosanct about your meeting time. If you're a state bar board that meets bi-monthly or quarterly for a full day, consider breaking that meeting up into 2 days and meeting for a shorter period of time. Zoom fatigue is real, and issues that warrant the board's attention may not wait until the next quarter. Also, think about how you might think about your meeting times. Many local boards meet over lunch. For moms and dads juggling homeschooling with other responsibilities, and this might not be the optimal time. Check with your board. Look for a mutually convenient time. Action item 2, create guidelines and set expectation in advance of the meeting. You're on mute has replaced, can you hear me now, as the center square of the virtual meeting bingo card. These guidelines should include an expectation for the use of video. The mix of some video and some audio is the worst of all possible virtual worlds. Suggest that folks log in at least 5 to 10 minutes before the start of the meeting, preferably 10. Request that board members and guests log in with their names, not their kids' names or the law firm name. You want to be able to call on people. Be very specific about start, end, and break times. Tell members about the dress code. Is it come in you are in your home office, or is it go to court attire? We want to know. Make wandering children, meandering cats, and barking dogs permissible. Everybody gets it. Be detailed about security, passwords, and the waiting room. Most importantly, provide contact information for whoever will be doing tech troubleshooting during the event. This is really important, and we'll come back to it. Set expectations for multitasking. Promise breaks in exchange for undivided attention for efficient use of members' time. Detail how members will be called upon to speak on matters before the board. You are missing body language, and everyone jumping in at once doesn't work. Will you use the hand raising function? Will you call on members alphabetically? Will it be a round robin? Indicate how last minute requests will be handled. Don't email docs in the middle of the meeting. It is highly disruptive. Present an opportunity for a test run for anyone having a matter before the board. This helps them and it helps you. Action item 3, design the agenda with interactivity in mind. Oftentimes, board meetings are a series of reports. Please don't tell me what I can read. Use executive summaries. If you haven't been using one, for goodness sake, use a consent agenda. Time out your agenda. Stipulate whether it's an action item that will require a vote or for informational purposes only. Send the agenda and all supporting materials well in advance. Using a board portal such as Board Effect can help. Item 4, use the platform's capabilities. Whatever platform you're using, match its capabilities with what you're trying to accomplish. Think about taking questions in the chat box with a designee monitoring them that would allow for bundling of like questions. Again, efficient use of time. Or use the hand raising capability to monitor questions. Action item 6. Build breaks into your agenda. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Sitting, we sit all day. Even if your board meeting is only an hour, build in a 5-minute break so someone can grab a cup of coffee or check that incoming text message. Item 6, your agenda. Mix up the agenda to create opportunities for the board to be generative about what lies ahead beyond the immediate concerns. If there ever was a time to frame opportunities, engage in dialogue around possibilities, and create a future that looks different than the before times, it is now. As much as we may wish it so, things are not going back to what they look like before. It is the board's responsibility to understand and design what could be next. There is no small list of topics to spend our time on as we face a recession, a lack of public trust and confidence, diversity and inclusion challenges, and the impact of technology on the practice and the administration of justice. You get the idea. Action item 7. Look at ways to incorporate special guests into your board meeting. Deans, judges, legislators, and others might have been challenged before with a travel time coming to an in-person meeting. Who can inform your decision-making and spend 20 minutes with you on Zoom? Review your to-do list at the top of your meeting. Read the rules of the road again. Script it out. Use your iPad as a teleprompter if you can. In the preparation, we talked about having a technology troubleshooter identified before the meeting. This is the most important person the day of your event. A very useful tool. Use a hand gesture like this to indicate that someone is muted. It saves that disruption. Action item 9, don't be the chief cook and bottle washer. Designate someone to help you. While the secretary and executive director are taking minutes, designate someone to create an action item list in the chat as they occur. Afterwards, you can clean up the document and email it out, and there's a great immediate record of the meeting. If you're hosting a hybrid meeting, appoint a bridger. The bridger can monitor the chat and schedule those participating virtually for a time to meet. It's less distracting for you who's chairing the meeting. Action item 10, start the meeting with an icebreaker. I know that you're groaning, but after the housekeeping announcements and the rules of the road, create some space for informal interchange. If you're a large board, use the poll function. Ask about streaming services, ask about in the chat about movie or book suggestions. For a smaller board, tell us something good that's happened to you since the last meeting and tell us in 20 seconds or less. Action item 11, follow the agenda. Enforce time limits. Adopt scheduling for controversial matters so that speakers have a limited amount of time to address the issue. Use a timer. Give a 20-second warning for folks to wrap up their comments. Action item 12, use Robert's Rules of Order. Even virtually, we need to follow them. You still need a motion, a second, and a vote. Also, have the roster handy in case of a voice vote. Action item 13, pay attention to the strategic plan. My guess is that your plan has broad statements about access to justice, the administration of justice, regulation of the profession, and serving members. How do these objectives and tactics need to be updated amid changing circumstances? Your values and your vision should guide you. Action item 14, engage with the finances. This is that rainy day. Tough choices may be necessary. Revisit your investment, revisit your reserves. Have those conversations with your board. Action item 14, evaluate your board meeting. Use the polling feature and remote access, about how the remote access went and ways in which you can be approved. It can be improved. Other consideration, action item 16 in lieu of a board retreat or an orientation. While your board year may have already started, it isn't too late to create some online social space for the board to come together, to create that we of me I mentioned. Lawyers are competitive, right? Hold a trivia night for the board using an online platform such as Kahoot or You Don't Know Jack. Host a cooking demonstration with a local chef or a virtual wine or beer tasting. You might consider a social distance tailgate like parking lot party with boxed dinners for everyone. Create a board mask for justice. Consider assigning mentors or buddies to new board members so they can learn the ropes and feel comfortable. Have everyone on the board fill out the Proust survey, you know, the one that appears in the back of Vanity Fair, and then share it with everyone. You'll get some interesting results, I guarantee it. Finally, acknowledge that this is not the year you had planned as the leader of your bar organization, but know that your leadership is more meaningful and more impactful than any of the pet projects that you may have planned combined. This is the time for real leadership, and you are there to give it. Action items will be in the handout, and I look forward to discussing this with you.
So good afternoon, Dana. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity to interview with some questions. As you know, my name is Nisha Christian Hendrickson, and I'm currently the president of the Virgin Islands Bar. And so I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Thanks, Nisha. I look forward to spending this time with you.
Awesome. So the first question that I would like to ask is that, and these are all centered, of course, on bar leadership. Often, bar leaders tend to be more assertive than even other lawyers. How do you navigate that space as a woman in the profession?
That's an interesting question. As you know, I think mostly because of a subconscious bias, a lot of people see assertive women as sometimes more difficult to work with, even bullies. I've certainly, as I'm sure you have, and most women watching this, if not all women watching this, have encountered similar thoughts and approaches by others. And I think the easiest way that I've been able to deal with it is first, I just think about treating others the way I'd like to be treated. So I certainly have been in especially bar association situations where I'm not the leader. I'm one of the people on the team. And so I think about, what do I look for in a team leader, and how can I, sorry, that was my cat. And how can I treat others that way? And then second, something that is a little more personal for me is when I try to be aware of how I treat others, but I try not to apologize for who I am and how I approach things. So often I find myself in crafting a response, starting with the words, well, I'm sorry, but, and then I stop myself and I say, you know, I don't need to apologize for what I'm about to say or who I am.
Yes.
And there's no need to do that. When you're a leader and you're duly elected or duly appointed to do the job you're doing, it's because you're good at it. And people respect you and they want to be led by you. So don't apologize for that. So that's really something that I've tried to embrace as a leader in a bar association. And I think it's been successful.
Great, thank you. So the second question is that, you know, of course, the issue of the day, of course, is the pandemic. So how to motivate a team during difficult times, you know, especially during crisis, is always a challenge. How do you keep bar leaders on mission and on message when they're doing the proverbial chicken little? When they feel everything, the sky is totally falling, how do you keep the long-term agenda on the mark?
I think communication is key, and making sure that everyone on your team understands what the long-term goals are, but also understanding that in order to reach those long-term goals, sometimes you just need to do some triage with what's happening now. You know, I'm thinking, when I was chair of the Young Lawyers Division, we had just about 200,000 members all across the country. So most of my interactions with my team were virtual. over the computer or over the phone. We had very little in-person interaction. We did not have any crises like a pandemic, thank goodness. That's a really tough one. Sorry, Nisha. But we did have a lot of things going on. And I think it was always important for me when dealing with an issue popping up to say to the person who had been delegated the long-term goal for whatever was on our mind, to say, listen, how can we triage this? How can we address it in a way that accomplishes the long-term goal, but meets the short-term goal of addressing our members' needs? So for example, we have a long-term goal of increasing membership. We can still accomplish that in dealing with the needs of a pandemic, but we have to say, okay, how can we help our members now in a way that will attract more members and retain the members we have today? Exactly.
So the next question is, what are some of the strengths that you have relied on during your leadership?
So I had to become good at being okay with delegating things. I think, as with most bar association leaders, you have learned to rely on yourself to get where you want to go. And when you're leading a team, and especially a board of governors, a board of directors, even a larger council or an assembly, you have to realize that you can't physically, mentally, emotionally do everything yourself. You need to be okay with delegating things, and you need to trust other people. So for me, learning to trust the people I work with, learning to trust myself to be okay with that was a difficult thing to do at first, but once you do it, it's freeing. And it makes it much easier to work with people, and you can find so much more success, because there's so much value in working with people who are not you, people who have diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, diverse education and job opportunities, and everything's different. And when it's different from you, that makes things so much better. So
great. So, and speaking of opportunities, what areas of opportunity in your own personality did you have to kind of work on to be able to achieve, and were you able to meet those?
I saw my leadership as an opportunity to sort of do a lot more overseeing and supervising and managing than actual everyday boots on the ground type work. And that's just because you can't physically be in every place you need to be getting stuff done. So I had to learn to sort of sit back, be the person, going back to one of our earlier questions, that keeps the larger long-term picture in mind, and make sure that we have regular communication with our team members to go over those goals, to work together and make sure that everything we're doing in the meantime, everything that everyone else is doing, sort of ultimately relates back to and supports those long-term goals. But a lot of what the big leader is doing, or even members of the board of directors, is directing other people and working with them to be the best they can be, so that they can help you do better yourself.
So how do you find that you're able to really prioritize when there's equally but important different priorities? So for example, family, work, and bar activities. How do you prioritize what is most important?
Where's the fire? That's it. I mean, sometimes it's an hour by hour analysis, and sometimes it's a day by day analysis. Sometimes it's a little longer term, right? A week by week, month by month. But when I was chair of the Young Lawyers Division, I didn't have two small kids at home. I had one growing inside me. I was pregnant, and I gave birth in the middle of my year, which definitely made things more difficult and certainly a challenge. But for me, priorities were always, obviously health and personal health and dealing with your family. And I think everyone has that as their top priority. But dealing with things as they arose, and understanding that you have to be flexible. You have to be okay if things don't go the way you wanted them to go at first. And you have to be okay with knowing that things may not go how you intend them to go once you start working on something. I certainly think that temporary short-term balance is achievable if you can prioritize things in a way that gets what needs to get done soon, effectively, successfully, and then you can move to the next thing. So
it's hard, right? Having to balance things are all very important. It's a challenge for everybody, but thank you for that answer.
For me, it's I always tell people having a newborn baby is like being in March Madness, right? It's about survival and advancing. Just one day at a time. You gotta win the game and move to the next day. I think sometimes, being a leader in a bar association, especially during a trying time like the COVID-19 pandemic, is a lot like that. Sometimes you just gotta survive today. Sometimes that means physically, like with your
Yes.
health, survive
Mhm.
today, move till tomorrow, and tackle what you can tomorrow. I think that that's really the only way to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, people are asking about 5-year plans, and I'm looking for Friday. You know, we're this is where we are right now. So the next question is, now more than ever, it's really important for bar leaders to pull their weight. What advice do you have for bar leaders who, you know, I've observed that there's a board member who's never consistent in doing what they need to do. They don't show up to meetings. They don't answer phone calls. They don't do what they need to really advance the goal. What advice do you have for them?
Well, being a leader means making hard decisions sometimes, and that means understanding that, you know, people on your team, their priorities change. Things happen that you don't know about. So the first thing, you know, you have to do is try to be understanding that their position might have changed, and do what you can to get in touch with that person. But if you have immediate urgent needs that need to get taken care of, that person had been responsible for doing, but all of a sudden they're not doing, after you've made your due diligence to get in touch with that person and understand what's going on, sometimes a hard decision needs to be made, which is, who else can I delegate this to? And how can I get it done today or whenever it needs to get done? That might feel like you're stepping on people's toes, but you need to make sure that you're giving people opportunities to get involved. And at the same time, you're not, you know, you're communicating to them that I want you to do this. You know, there's a reason why I asked you to help me with this particular thing, but I understand if you're not able to do it right now. If you have other things going on, if maybe something happened at work, something happened at home, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do need to ask that someone else now step in and help us to do this. So I think, you know, that has been my approach. And I've also found as a leader that you're always going to have one or two people on your team that happens with. So that's okay. You know, as the leader, you need to be responsible for making sure that someone does it, but that's what you have a team for. So, you know, be sympathetic, be understanding, give other people grace, but also be assertive, as we talked about earlier, and understand and help other people understand that, you know, you have a job to do, and if they're unable to do it, that's okay, but you need to find someone else.
Right. So the next question is, you know, this, as you said before, is a year like no other. So some bar leaders feel understandably cheated out of their year because it's not the year that they planned. They planned a completely different year, and COVID-19 said, this is what we're doing this year. So what advice do you have for leaders that feel like they didn't really get the year that they had intended or they didn't plan?
Well, if anything, this year has shown me that there is a very special need for leaders in bar associations. And just because you didn't get the year you wanted doesn't mean that people still don't need you. They do. They need strong leaders that can show them how they can manage their law practice, how they can keep their clients, how they can manage their books, how they can stay afloat. For younger attorneys, you know, they need strong leaders that can show them how they can take the bar exam, how they can navigate whatever kind of bar exam they're going to take, how they can enter a profession and what that profession means. So the year may look different, but it certainly isn't different in the sense of not needing strong leadership.
So that goes right into our next question. Elizabeth mentioned before that flexibility is key right now. What flexibility strategies do you have for bar leaders during this time?
Being flexible. Well, you have to let go of expectations sometimes. There are many ways to get things done, and just because something may not be getting done the way you initially planned for, doesn't mean that it will not be successful. You can be absolutely just as successful, albeit in a different way. I think key to being successful and flexible is keeping open lines of communication with your team. So whether that's keeping regular conference calls or Zoom calls on the books, I am a big fan of saying, hey, you know, the first Tuesday of every month, let's just put a call on the books. So it's in your Outlook calendar, and we're going to make sure that we have that time available. Sometimes you don't need the time, and you can cancel the call or the meeting ahead of time. And that way you're sort of giving people back time into their day. It's a pleasure. People like hearing that. But at the same time, if you need that meeting or you need that opportunity to meet with your team and just communicate about what's going on, how you can get things done, how you can help them, that's clutch. So I think communication is absolutely key. I think understanding is key. You have to give your team members some grace and know that maybe they're not answering that email right away because somebody in their house has a fever and they're trying to handle how to do that. Or, you know, maybe they're dealing with laying off employees right now and they need to deal with that situation. I mean, work and family and all of these other priorities, these are words we keep coming back to. But people have a lot going on right now. So being flexible just means communicating, being understanding, and offering some grace.
So final question to you. You mentioned Zoom in the previous question. So of course, this is the year of Zoom. We're communicating almost exclusively on one of the many platforms. Normally, bar leaders get an opportunity to meet and kind of bond in person at different events. What suggestions do you have to really make those bonds and make those connections when you can't meet in person, you can only meet virtually?
It's really hard. You know, some of the greatest parts of meetings are, you know, is that one-on-one intimate conversation you can have with people, especially as a leader. So I think the first thing that I would do as a leader when you're dealing with a team of people you don't know well, or perhaps even at all, is make sure you set aside time to reach out individually to each of your team members. So set a call. If you don't really like the video feature on Zoom, that's okay. Set an old-fashioned call. We all still have telephones. But make a time to individually meet with each of your members. Then I would offer your team opportunities to meet more socially over social media, or not even social media, over Zoom or other remote software. So I've attended a couple of Zoom happy hours. Always BYOB, of course, but you know, they're fun. They don't have to last long. Schedule one for 45 minutes, or you know, if you're not paying for Zoom, they have the 40-minute free meeting. Schedule a 40-minute happy hour where you can have a glass of wine and just get to know people over the screen. You'd be surprised how natural it feels, so that people know that you have quote unquote open door policy, that they can always reach you, whether it's on your cell phone or your office phone, you know, or your email. I know a lot of people don't like to give out their cell phone numbers, but I think sometimes being reachable, especially in the work from home time that we're dealing with now, means giving out your cell phone number. We're all respectful of that, so I think it's a reasonable thing to do. Understanding that this could be a blessing in disguise is a good thing too.
Well, then I want to just thank you. I think a lot of the questions that we had were a little bit challenging, but you answered them with grace, and I really appreciate the dialogue we had today. And thanks, I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.